Welcome to the use guide for prototype couplers DGB87BLI. In this guide, we will be converting a Broadway Limited Imports B6SB from this to this. Before we begin, please familiarize yourself with the contents of DGB87BLI. Inside each kit is 12 resin draft gearboxes. For installation on the B6SB, you will need one resin draft gearbox and a coupler of your choice. In this example, we will be installing a EC87M040K coupler. Please note that couplers are sold separately. Please start by carefully flipping the tender over. If required, you may disconnect the tender from the locomotive for easier handling. Note, we recommend using a locomotive cradle for any locomotive work. Take a number 0 Phillips screwdriver and remove the screw holding the factory draft gearbox to the tender frame. Remove the factory draft gearbox, coupler and screw from the tender frame. You may now set your tender aside and start working on assembling the new draft gearbox. We recommend painting your new resin draft gearbox before installation to prevent ultraviolet light from damaging the material. Start by removing the factory draft gearbox lid from the factory draft gearbox and set it aside as it will be reused later. You may discard the rest of the factory draft gearbox and coupler as they will not be used. Next, position the friction spring into the new resin draft gearbox as shown. This part is best done on a flat level surface. Orientate the coupler so that the top of the coupler is facing up and angle it slightly to capture the friction spring as you slide the coupler in place from the front of the draft gearbox. This may take a couple of tries. When done correctly, it should look like this. You may now place the factory draft gearbox lid on the new resin draft gearbox. Please pay special attention to the orientation of the lid. Press firmly to make sure the lid is locked in place. Please take a moment to check that the coupler swings freely in the new draft gearbox and that the friction spring holds the coupler in place when no pressure is applied. With the tender still on its back, drop the new draft gearbox assembly into place at the rear of the tender. Please pay special attention to the orientation of the coupler. The top of the coupler head should be facing down. Double check that the draft gearbox is seated properly before moving on to the next step. Replace the factory screw we removed earlier, being careful not to over-tighten the screw as this can prohibit the coupler from swinging freely. If you do over-tighten, please loosen the screw and try again. You want the screw just tight enough that nothing moves when pressure is applied. This concludes the assembly and installation of prototype couplers DGB87BLI on the Broadway Limited Imports B6SB. These instructions can be used on other Broadway Limited Imports products. We hope you found this video informative. For more assembly videos, including replacement of the pilot coupler for this locomotive, please visit our YouTube channel Prototype Couplers.